Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Patricia Meredith, and I am here today with Corin Faye to talk about one of my favorite children's books of all time, The Wizard of Oz. And we actually did this as a joint read. We read Wizard of Oz, and we also read a middle grade fiction called Short by Holly Goldberg Sloan. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Holly Goldberg Sloan. Yes. So we will get into that in a minute, because I definitely want to talk about like all the different adaptions and adaptations and inspirations and just the way Wizard of Oz has infiltrated our culture, and it's such a wonderful story. So the first thing I wanted to start with was a quote from this is the annotated Wizard of Oz. If you haven't noticed, I love annotated versions because they give me all the backstory stuff. This one has a beautiful opening map of Oz, and this is based on the original Oz. If you go look it up and you find the flag of Oz, it looks like this. There's the Wizard of Oz Emerald City in the middle, and then each of the different countries around it in the different colors. So, which is something we'll talk about because that's from the book. So one of the biggest things you'll probably hear often tonight is, well, unlike in the movie, here's what they decided to do instead of what is actually in the book, because the book is very different for all good reasons. So what I loved though was the opening quote that was in this, and this is who wrote the preface. Martin Gardner says, "Almost every great nation has its immortal work of juvenile fantasy. In England, it is Lewis Carroll's Alice books. Germany has Grimm's fairy tales. France has the stories by Perrault. Yes. Denmark has its Andersen. Italy's classic is Pinocchio. In America, the classic fantasy is, of course, L. Frank Baum's The Wizard of Oz." And to me, I had never thought of The Wizard of Oz as like a fairy tale, like Alice in Wonderland and Perrault's version of Cinderella and the Grimm fairy tales and Andersen and all of those stories, right? So I thought that was it's very true, I think, that America's fairy tale is Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I had heard that before as well. Like, it's exactly what you said, kind of our juvenile fantasy. Like, everyone kind of is familiar with the story to the point that it becomes like what you can easily reference when you are kind of trying to make I'll use the word parable. You were like, hold that thought, but I was like, it is,
it's a parable. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because like one of my favorite adaptations or versions or whatever is in Scrubs. Have you ever watched Scrubs?
No.
It was a TV show that I binge watched in college. Andrew and I like watch it all the time. And it's one of my like comfort shows to go back and watch. And it's about medical students. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. The main actor in it who plays JD. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on his name now? Zach Braff. Yeah, Zach Braff. Yeah. He directed the Wizard of Oz episode. And there's a whole episode where it's all medical students. It's all taking place in a hospital, but the entire storyline is Wizard of Oz. So one of them is he's a surgeon, and so he's looking for a heart for his transplant patient. And then there's somebody else with brains, somebody else looking for courage. There's even a Wicked Witch of the West who melts. Like it's all tied in. And he's listening to Toto, to the artist, the singing artist Toto. So there's Toto, and there's like there's a point in the script where it stops being. It's almost kind of grayed out, the whole opening of it. And then they like follow the yellow brick road, and it's the janitor has decided to paint a line down the hallways to guide you from one room to the next, and so they have to follow the yellow brick road to figure out where they can get everything that they need, and they have to go speak to the wizard, and it's all in theme. And so I love episodes like that where they can, with something so familiar, right, and then they completely twist it. But what I loved about going back to the original book, because it was published in 1900. So, like, I reference it in my books because that's 1901. And so they can talk about, I think Archie makes a passing reference at one point about, oh, this children's book that came out last year.
Mhm.
It was it was a bestseller. And it immediately hit everyone was talking about it.
Yeah.
The play, the first musical adaptation of the play written by Baum came out in 1902 or 1903. I was trying to pinpoint exactly when that was. I think he wrote it in 1902. It was first produced and on stage in 1903.
Mhm.
So the fact that it was so fast, so it went from book to movie, basically, right? If you got your book into a play production, then
Yeah.
that's it becoming a movie. So the fact that it was so fast just proves how popular it was.
Yeah.
And so it just, from the very beginning, it was part of, growing up for kids and adults, because it is one of those children's books that, is it C.S. Lewis who says, like, the best children's books can be read, are even better when they're read as an adult.
Yeah. He
Uh,
did. Yeah.
Something like that. And that's so true for Wizard of Oz. I loved rereading it. Did you
Yeah.
enjoy it?
I do love The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
I remember reading it as a kid and really enjoying the book just for itself.
Yeah.
And it felt very different than the movie,
It is.
including the character of Dorothy, who we were talking before we began our official discussion, but she is very practical. She's a very like, packing her basket full of food and which they you don't show that as much in the film anyway because it's not really an exciting part of someone's character, but I just like that about her in the book.
Except it is. She takes care of herself, right? She's
Yeah,
not a helpless orphan child, right?
no, she's not.
She's a little girl who knows what she has to do. You got to make sure you have food. You got to make sure you're dressed properly. You have shoes that you can walk in. You have, and then she's thinking about, where am I going to sleep tonight? And where am I going to, whatever. And then when she meets the Scarecrow and Tin Man, and they don't have to worry about those things. And so she thinks about that,
Yeah,
and she's just she notices things about the world around her, and
yeah,
yet still maintains that innocence of a child that,
yeah,
how, like, children say the darndest things, where,
yeah,
my 7-year-old will say something so profound. And I'm like, where did that come from? And then Dorothy would say things like that. She'll
yeah.
make comments. And so, you might have readers who are like, oh, a kid wouldn't say something like that. It's like, no, they would.
Well, in some ways, she does feel adult.
Hmm.
It's the fact that she comes across adult sometimes also makes her seem childlike as well.
Right.
There can be an overlap between the two.
Yeah.
Where, because she does notice things and she is very practical, and being in a different world doesn't really throw her off as that much. I mean, she kind of knows that she wants to go home right away,
Right.
and so she has a goal immediately. And yeah, so it's kind of interesting how her character is composed, because there is kind of this childlike, I don't know, acceptance of where she is, and yet at the same time the sense of like, but I do belong at home.
Right. Yeah.
Very simple in a lot of
Well, and
ways.
she has that great conversation with the Scarecrow about, where he's like, well, why do you want to go home? Right. If it's gray and boring and terrible, why do you want to go
Yeah.
back? And she's just kind of like, because I do, because it's home.
Yeah.
Right. You wouldn't understand that,
Yeah.
um, that there is a power to home, no matter how dismal it might seem when we're there. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a I always usually bring things back to some kind of spiritual thing, but, like, it is sort of a metaphor a little bit for the spiritual life, because
Yeah.
you do kind of have to go on that journey in order to discover even what home is, and even if home doesn't look that different or is the same place that you left behind, there is something about leaving and then coming back, like
Yeah.
the Hobbit there and back again. That
Yes.
is, um,
Yes.
it's about coming back a different person.
Right.
Um,
And yet,
yeah,
what you said before about, like, you come back a different person, and yet it's really discovering that you had what you needed all along.
yeah, yes, which really, really comes through in the book more than the movie, I think.
Yes,
In the mo
absolutely.
in the movie, it felt almost like a different point that you could slowly get these things by trying.
Right. Through
Maybe I
spirit.
got it. Maybe I got it wrong from the movie, but it felt a little bit more like they kind of became more what they wanted to become as the movie went along. Like the cowardly
Mhm.
lion became less cowardly, and
Yeah.
um, yeah. But in the book, it just was it's so much more plain and obvious that they have the things that they think that they're missing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I don't know if you agree with me on that about the movie feeling a little bit different in that
Oh
point. Maybe
yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. And the way the movie is set up is much more adventure centric. Like it's overcoming a bad guy. It's all about overcoming a bad guy, and oh, the bad guy's not who you think it is. You know,
Yeah.
shocker. Frozen wasn't the first movie to do that. Like that trope's been around forever. But and Wizard of Oz is one of those great examples of wow, like that probably actually that probably was a huge twist when it came
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
to find out that the bad guy, you know, in the book, we were just talking about it beforehand, but in the book, the Wicked Witch of the West is a minor character.
Yeah.
She's only mentioned when they go to get her,
Yeah.
and then she's dead within 2 chapters. I
Yeah.
mean, and because it's a short book, it's what 40,000 words. I mean, it was short.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so there's lots of the whole framework for it, I think, changes in the movie version, especially with adding that it's just a dream,
Yeah.
right? That it's her, that each of the characters, which I remember liking that the first time I read it, or the first time I saw it. Now, having read the book again, I'm like, no, I like it better in the book where she's just off to Oz
Yeah.
and she's discovering things and learning things along the way. And I like that it wasn't a dream framework.
Yeah.
I think something can be said for both versions, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I again, that struck me when I read the book as a kid. I'm like, oh no, it's real. Like she
Yeah.
actually does go. The tornado does carry her to Oz.
Oh yeah.
A place that's and then when she's comes home, she's transported over the desert that surrounds Oz and keeps it separate from the rest of the world. And
Right.
I remember that because the ruby slippers, which are the silver shoes in the book, fall off in the desert. And I'm
Right.
like, I feel bummed because um, yeah, I'm like,
Like, oh, she can't use those, but then she ends up finding other things. Because that's the thing is this is the first of I think it's like 30 books, or
oh
maybe
yeah,
not that many. Maybe it's 14. How many books?
yeah. I don't know. I've only read this one actually. I've never read any of the.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Ozma of Oz is my absolute favorite. That's the
Okay.
third one. You need to read the second one first, but then the third one is yeah. Ozma has TikTok and has some other characters that I just love. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, because each book explores a little bit more. Like in the second one, there's no person coming to Oz. It's the character who's already in Oz.
Mm,
And he does that a couple times. There's
yeah.
certain books where it's not about somebody from our world coming in. Dorothy comes back a couple times. You don't discover what her last name is until book. Maybe it is in book 2.
Is her name actually Dorothy Gale, or did they do that
It
from?
is, but
Oh.
it's actually they came up with the name in the play.
Oh.
So her name is Dorothy Gale because of a punchline in the play where where she says something about, I'm Dorothy Gale because I blew in on a tornado or whatever. It has something to do with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, but her last name's not given in the book. There's also hardly any description of her in
Yeah.
the book other than her dress.
Yeah.
She distinctly describes that it is blue and white.
Yeah.
Check. Very particular about the shoes and the dress, but other than that, Dorothy could be anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's great because it's one of those everyman things
Yeah.
where any child could read this, boy or girl, and identify with Dorothy of being a child away from home,
Yeah.
searching for home,
Yeah.
searching for who they are.
Yeah.
While the characters around her are also searching for that.
So interesting. She's such an iconic character. It's interesting to have an everyman kind of character be so iconic because she's also just kind of unmistakable. Like if I see like a blue and white checked dress,
Right.
I do think Dorothy. And then also just the name Dorothy. It feels like it belongs to the Wizard of Oz, even though it's been around forever, that name.
Right. That's true. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, all the characters are actually iconic.
They are.
It's an interesting story where every character is iconic.
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very ensemble. Right.
Yeah.
So they each are very they're very important.
Yeah.
You need all of them and you need all of them together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in that way, it is like that fairy tale, like Grimm, right? Where you're like, okay, well, if I'm going to retell Cinderella, I have to have the evil
Yeah.
at least one evil stepsister, evil stepmother, a Cinderella, and a prince, right? You
Yeah.
have to have a fairy godmother, right? So I have to have these characters in order to tell the story of Cinderella.
Yeah.
Whether you include a clock tower and a carriage and the glass slipper or not, right? It doesn't matter which version you're doing, but you have to have these characters. And
Yeah.
in Wizard of Oz, you have to have
Yeah.
our main four, and then Oz himself as a humbug. I love him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did want to re-ask you. You had asked a question before we started, and I wanted to do that on film here. So, what was your question?
What was my question? Did I ask
Which character do you most identify with?
Oh, yes. Yeah,
I did that was a great question. It's like a personality test. Which character do you most identify with, Corin?
Tin Man.
Tin Man.
Yes. Especially in the book, he's so concerned about like his heart and tenderness, and he feels like he's not tender enough, but he's actually very tender and worried about killing like a beetle, I think it is. Or something. He's just like, he tries not to step on insects. And it's very relatable to me, that whole kind of like the desire to be soft-hearted or tender-hearted to creation, but to feel like you're kind of like not like you're made of tin or something. You're just likely to crush something, or anyway, that's my relatability thing. What about you?
So I said Dorothy because I want to go home.
Yeah.
That's my goal, is to go home. But then I was joking and saying I also identify with the Wicked Witch of the West, because all she wants is the shoes.
Yeah.
But that's actually the exact opposite of me. I don't care anything about shoes. But it's just funny to think about that. So,
but you did say the Scarecrow too.
I did, yes, that's true. I also said the Scarecrow. I understand where the Scarecrow is coming from, feeling like he's not smart enough.
Yeah.
Right. So that fear of, I'm not smart enough, I don't know enough, but then realizing, no, I do.
Yeah.
Right? And that brains aren't the most important thing, right? So he and the Tin Man have another great conversation in the book where, which is better, brains or heart? Which is more important? And basically the answer is both, right?
Yeah.
But it's those, there's a lot of those in the book that they didn't include in the movie. They add some other lines in the movie that I wish had been in the book, that I was like, oh, I'm surprised that's not. A lot of the punch lines about, like, politicians are all scarecrows, things like that. They're all straw men set up, and there's no brains in politics, that kind of thing. There's a lot of comments like that more in the movie. There was one time where he did make that comment. I think it's towards the end, where he basically says that when Oz is passing on he's going to leave the Scarecrow in charge, and he makes this comment about how politicians are all straw men. So, okay. Nothing's changed. But there's lots of other conversations, and there's lots of characters that are missing from the movie. Like, I love the Mouse Queen and her little mice.
Yes, I love
and
that.
How they save the lion. Like, that's so Aesop's fables. And I love that part, and I was sad that that's not in there. And the Wicked Witch of the West isn't green. In no way is she green. If anything, she might be yellow because she's in the land of the Winkies, but
oh, that's right. They each have their kind of color code.
Right. So so she lands in Munchkin, and that Munchkin land, and that's blue.
Yes.
Right. And then she goes to Oz, and that's green. And then she goes to the Winkies to kill the Wicked Witch of the West, and that's yellow. And then eventually they have to go down south to Glinda, and they meet the Quadlings, who are red.
Yeah.
So the one we don't see in this one, but later in later Oz books, you see the Gillikins, who are the north, and they're purple.
Okay.
So that's why that map is those colors. But then the good witches are all in white, and the bad witches are all in black.
Yeah.
And so, which is very fairy tale. But also, when you were just asking which character do you identify with, and you started talking about the Tin Man and the heart, and I know you're also a Hufflepuff.
Yeah.
So I suddenly realized, wait a minute. So also Harry Potter is also based on Wizard of Oz. I think each of her houses represents that, because you got Gryffindor with the lion.
Yeah.
But then where's Slytherin? Does that mean Slytherin is the Scarecrow?
No, that would be Ravenclaw.
Yeah, that would be Ravenclaw.
Yeah, you can't.
Which is,
I don't know
which is
that.
why I identify with the Scarecrow, because I'm a Ravenclaw. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So is Slytherin the one that wants to just go home? They don't want to be bad.
No, Slytherin, I would say almost would be more like.
Wicked Witch of the West.
It's just. I don't know that it's enough of a correlation.
And well, no, Slytherin is Oz. They're two-faced and they're sly and they're cunning, right? And so they're willing to. They want the power, right? So he fakes his power the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know if I see him as Slytherin though, because he's not a bad guy. I mean, I think
well,
Slytherin.
and Slytherin's not always bad either, though.
Okay.
Right? It's only in especially once you do the play that adds in the whole fact that Slytherin is not always bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a trope because the original Harry Potter books, start very simple, very simplistic. These are the bad guys and these are the good guys. But then as we go further in,
Yeah.
you see it's not always that way.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's very Ozian.
Mm-hmm. I do think though that the book is not nearly as cynical as it could be. And that kind of, I remember, because the Emerald City is only emerald because of the spectacles.
Right.
Um,
I love that. That it is all fake. That
there's a genuine beauty to the city though, and
right.
the jewels are real. They're just not emerald.
But the fact that everything is green is only because they're wearing glasses, and I wish that had been in the movie. Like, yeah.
Oh yeah, that'd be hard to film though.
But exactly to show that except that they're just all wearing glasses, right? But yeah, but that it's all.
But then everything would be half. I mean, Dorothy would have to be green. I think everything.
So, have you ever seen Wicked?
No, haven't.
Wicked the musical, they do stay true to the book a lot more.
Okay.
And so when they go to Oz, they put on glasses when they go in, and everything is filtered through green. And so everything looks green, and the lighting is green, and everything is green because once they put on the glasses. So they do manage to show that. In fact, I probably have a picture of it in this one.
Yeah. I just remember that Dorothy likes the Emerald City even when I think she kind of realizes that it's not real, or that the emerald part is at least kind of faked. And I just kind of remember thinking, I feel like if this was a modern story, that would be a lot more like disillusioning or devastating than it is to the characters. And I mean, Dorothy kind of was just like, okay, whatever, it's still a nice city. And then she just, so
she's also a child. I feel like to an adult,
yeah,
it's a little bit more, we see what he's doing there, what Baum is doing there. That's the Emerald City.
Oh, okay.
There. So yeah. If you have not seen Wicked, that needs to be on your to-do list because it is hands down the best musical. Like, yeah. It's definitely the best version of Wizard of Oz on stage, I think. It is much better than the book. Don't read the book.
Oh, the book Wicked. Yeah.
Sorry to the author, but I do not like the book. It's not doing the same thing that the musical is. The musical has incredible themes and is very, very on top of it, and very poignant and very meaningful to today and what we're going through today. And it's funny because it came out 20 years ago. So it's really good. The book is kind of focusing on a different side of things. And so it's just darker. And you know me, I don't like dark books. So it's very much an adult version of Wizard of Oz. But it is clear he knows his Ozian lore. Because a lot of the whole Wicked setup and then the whole musical is wonderful because it makes so many nods to the original book. Bach, who has a little part in the book, who's the Munchkin, he's the head at Munchkin.
Yeah.
They like stay at his house, right? And I realized, oh, that's where she got the character of Bach from. Bach is in the book. And it's all about Glinda and the Wicked Witch of the West and her sister. Nessa, and it's so good.
And that's not the girl that Dorothy meets at first. It's the girl that she ends up with.
Right. And that's the other thing is in the book is going, okay, so like in the book, the Good Witch of the North is never named.
No, she's elderly.
she's just and she's small, and she thinks she's a munchkin, but she's not. She says
Yeah.
she's not a munchkin, but she's the size of the munchkins. In fact, all of the people of Oz are generally small. That's how she describes them.
Yeah.
It's not just the munchkins.
Uh-huh.
The Gillikins are described that way, and the Quadlings, and so I
Yeah.
assume the not the Gillikins, the other ones that they go to, the Winkies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Witch of the South keeps herself young and beautiful, and so that was more of like probably more of like the Glinda of our idea.
Well, yes, and absolutely, Glinda in the movie is the Glinda of the South, right?
Yeah.
But in the movie, she's of the North, and yeah. So that's a good point, though, that the Good Witch of the North is old versus the young Witch of the South. So if the Wicked Witch of the West is old, does that mean the one who got crushed by a house was young?
I have no idea.
You know?
And the Witch of the South may be keeping herself young by magic.
Oh yeah. But I mean, why wouldn't the Wicked Witch of the East, you know? But yeah, there's lots of, it's very overt parallels and very, it's not like it's very deep reading, and yet it is, right? You can it's very common moral tales and very common we've all brain, heart, courage, right? Brain, heart, courage, and I say that a million times at the end of every chapter. Brain, heart, courage, right? Home, right? These are the things that we're going for, and yet within that simplicity is some really deep thought-provoking moments.
Yeah. Well, I think anything gains depth if it rings true to you, because it's going to just draw on your own life experience as you read. And so the story doesn't need to overwork itself to be resonant with people, because the themes are so basic. And like, even just being able to identify like, oh, I feel more for the Tin Man, or like being like, oh, I can relate more to the Scarecrow. I mean, obviously, like, even right away, we're like, yes, we can empathize with certain aspects of their plight. And just the most poignant, I think, being like, you want something that you think that you don't have. You actually do have it, but you don't even see how that you have it.
Yeah.
And it takes this, and you're using this gift that you have, but then you're using it to get the gift. Like, that's the weirdest thing in the world. Like, that's what the story does really well, is like, they're all using their giftings that they think they don't have, they're going to Oz for.
Right.
And then they're using those gifts to get there to him.
Right.
They don't even recognize it.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. There's so many different like ways that you can explore that. You can explore the need for affirmation and how you don't think that you have these qualities until someone else affirms them in you.
Yeah.
You can talk about, you can legitimately say, do we not really appreciate ourselves or appreciate something we have until we feel like we've worked for it? And is that like good? Like, it's good to want to work for something, or is that bad in the sense of like we have a hard time receiving who we are as a gift? Like, which, you could look at that any number of ways and get something out of it. So yeah, I don't know. It also helps, like, sometimes I come across a strand of thinking about humanity that can be really pessimistic, kind of like almost focusing on only the bad stuff about us, or the bad dark parts of human nature, or how disillusioning it is, or whatever. So it's kind of nice to have a story that seems more positive. Like, sometimes you can actually have more courage, or more tenderness, or more intelligence than you think.
Well, and like, isn't that in so did your book have the opening letter from Baum? It's like like dear readers, it's probably in this one.
No.
My audiobook actually still read that, and I was surprised by that, and I was like, oh, that's I hadn't realized that was in the opening. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Yeah, so it's an introduction, so it looks like this.
Oh yeah, I see.
Yeah. And it's basically him saying that it's time for a new fairy tale.
Yeah.
That this is going to be a modern fairy tale, right? That we're done with Grimm. We're done with the morality tales. Let's just do something fun.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that he was like, okay, enough with that. Let's just
Yeah.
write an actual book for children, right?
Yeah.
Without trying to press our adult themes on it. And yet, what he delivers is something that is so poignant for children that it still
Yeah.
hits us as adults, right?
Yep. Yep.
Because in the end, simplicity is better, right?
Mm.
Even with writing adult fiction, right? So often we tend to be verbose and put too much in, and it's always better to pull some out
Mhm.
and let the reader, because every reader is going to bring their own experiences to a
Yeah.
book. And I think that's part of why children's books are so wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Because usually they are that simpler tale
Yep.
for the child level. But then as you get older, there's more things that pile on it because you had more experience and you've had more things to bring to the book.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember when I finished college, I was so I was so burned out on the academic side of reading that I actually went and read, like, all of Beverly Cleary's books, which I'd never read her before.
Oh, really? Yeah.
I had, like, Henry Huggins and The Mouse and the Motorcycle,
Yeah.
and I was working in an elementary school, and so I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get back in touch with, like, my elementary self."
Yeah.
I never had read those books before, and I was reading them, and I was like, it was just about kids in the neighborhood. You know, she just wrote
Mhm.
about she was very Beverly Cleary was definitely a realist. You know, she wasn't doing any fantasy, but it was just the kids playing in the neighborhood and Ramona Quimby in kindergarten trying to learn the Star Spangled Banner and
Yeah.
thinking the Don Early was kind of this weird machine or something, you
That's right.
know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've forgotten that. Oh,
So,
yeah.
and even pairing this with short,
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a good segue into short.
yeah, 'cause Short's one of my favorite kids' books, and, and again, like, we both love theater. We both love the process of putting something on stage and creating a production for people's enjoyment. Um
So actually, Corin, can you briefly, because probably a lot of people have
Oh, yeah.
not read Short. So what is Short about?
So Short is about a girl called
I think she.
Julia Marks, who does not have any interest really in being in theater. She's actually grieving the death of her dog.
Mhm.
And, her brother wants to be in the musical, and so her mom kind of makes them go together and audition for this play, and she gets a part, even though she doesn't want to, and she tries to get out of it. Um, and then I think she kind of falls in love with the other actors, including 3 adult actors who are, um, there to play the Munchkins, and I don't know, like, they're dwarves, right? Or they're how
They're yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what the correct term is now.
Yeah, I don't know what the term is.
She because she never really she just talks about how they're short
Yeah,
and how she doesn't want to use the word short because she herself is short.
that's right, yes.
And so it's I think the author did a very good job of never like she talks about heightism and ageism and
Yeah,
racism, and all sorts of these big themes. And I think she uses the word once. There's one time when an adult like uses those words to describe what the problem is.
yeah,
But otherwise it's all through Julia's point of view. And so because she's only what, 10, 12, she's middle school,
11, I think.
11.
Yeah,
Um, it's a very simplistic view of the world, and yet I loved it because it was, her questioning idioms. Why do you say we have butterflies in our throat? How do you get the butterflies in there? Wouldn't they
yeah,
just fly out? What about moths? What about,
yeah,
like it's those kinds of thoughts, and it's very train of thought. And so I loved it. It was
yeah.
wonderful.
That was one of my favorite things about it too, was how she thinks about things in just very simple, kind of point blank ways and kinda questioning things that I wouldn't even think to question. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
and just the different people that she meets, and, like, she meets, is it Mrs. Chang? Is that her name?
Yes. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the
Who's the costumer? Yeah.
costume designer, and just as she kind of gets to know the people in this theater world, she just falls in love with the production, and
Hmm.
she just yeah, she's like I don't know, I don't wanna give too much away in case people wanna read it, but she just gets more and more involved in different aspects of like,
Absolutely.
when she doesn't even want to, but then after she gets involved, she discovers what she loves about it.
Right.
So it's another journey of discovery where she finds out kind of
It is.
that she has what she needs.
Exactly. It was really good. Like I was really impressed because I'm very picky about my middle grade. I especially because I've got kids about to be in that like age range of reading. And so there are certain things I expect from a middle grade novel and other things that I really don't like in my middle grade novels.
Uh-huh.
Because I want to be able to hand it to my kids and say, here, just read this and enjoy it. And then we'll talk about it when you're done with it. Right. I don't want to have to handhold them through the book and be like, so it's going to deal with some things that we then need to talk about. Right. Like we started listening to Tom Sawyer, and that's actually one where I'm like, okay, this is one I have to like kind of read with my kids and talk about how we don't use those words anymore.
Yeah.
Like that. Like, okay, so if talk about the historical aspect. This
Yeah.
one, I loved this one because I feel like I could hand it to them. The biggest thing was she's dealing with grief with her dog the
Yeah.
whole time, but it's so softly, it's beautifully done.
Yeah.
Like all the way to the very end. It's a beautiful story of just life and experience and joy and the beauty of the diversity of people, and art. She has some incredible thoughts about art and what does art mean, and
Yeah.
just some really incredible things that again I'm like, when my 9-year-old reads it, he might not pick up on all those, right, on some of the deeper things. He'll be like, yeah, it's a good book about being in a play, I want to be in a play now, right? But it's one that as an adult, then you going back to it and reading it now, you're like, oh wow, there's some stuff there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of I've reread Short a few times. I do think that now as an adult, I actually love like kids' books.
Yeah.
Like, or at least I get more out of them. I would have loved that book as a kid too.
Yeah.
But I've gone back and reread some books and that I, haven't read since I was a kid. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these are great books. I wasn't even appreciating how good they were.
Right.
And even the newer ones that I read, because my mom was like an elementary school librarian. And
Right.
so that's how I found out about Short. She was constantly recommending books to me. And so I've read some great. And I'm like, I think I enjoy this now more than I would have done as an actual middle grade reader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really good. It made me want to do theater again. It reminded me of being part of theater and some of the drama that like she talks about that, there's drama and drama.
Yes.
And it's so true, so and so likes so and so doesn't like so and so, and all these things, like that's so true.
Yeah.
But she handled it. It's a very clean read. Like it's very, there's nothing inappropriate in it that comes up. There's no, there are things happening that you as an adult reading it will pick up on.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, well.
Yeah.
But for Julia, it goes right over her head. So for the reader, if you're a young reader, you're not going to pick up on those things, and that's fine. I love reading books like that with my kids where I'm picking up on things and laughing. Like, I mean, we're rereading Harry Potter right now. We're reading it for the first time with our kids. The very first book, and it's a really good book. It's one of those books that I'm like, wow, this holds up. This is as good as I remember it being.
Yeah.
But there are so many times where Andrew and I are like laughing, or we're catching things. We're like looking at each other, going, "Oh," because we know what's going to happen later, and we know who's going to do what, and who's going to end up with who, and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, no, it really is all there. But there's things in Short that you as an adult will just appreciate more. But there's definitely, it's really good. It's a good book. It's a very safe book.
Yeah.
It's what it was like when I was growing up. I don't know that kids are having the same experiences with adults, where they are in a safe place with adults, where they can have those, she's getting rides with an adult to practice and things like that. And her mom is not aware of who these people are. She meets them once and then kind of just, yep, great, trust you, right? She doesn't know who they are. I don't know that you could do that these days. Like, I need to really, really know the adult before I trust them with my child.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think it kind of feels more like a 90s story in some
ways?
Or,
yeah, because of that, but not in a way. There's nothing 90s about it that you would be like, oh my gosh, this is so 90s. Other than the safety aspect. She can hop on her bike and she bikes a couple miles to a friend's house, right? Yeah. And that's, you could do that.
Yeah.
Nowadays, my 11-year-old, no, not as an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
Maybe older, as a teenager, but not my 11-year-old.
That's one of the things that I love about it. It does remind me a bit more of my childhood.
Yeah.
when I
We were
used
very blessed to grow up in the 90s.
yeah, I remember walking to friends' houses in the neighborhood and stuff that you probably wouldn't let your kids do nowadays. 'Cause
Right.
we're
Yeah.
still in the single digits of life, and it wasn't, like, 2 miles, but we were still walking across the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So,
Oh
yeah,
yeah. All the time.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
think I wanna add too that one of the things I love about Short is also her kind of coming to terms with when a work of art feels like it has failed you in the
Yes.
moment. And it
Yep.
hasn't obviously completely failed her, but she has to examine, like, what it means to expect things of your participation in a work of art
Right.
when creating something. And then she has that relationship with the director that I love,
Yes.
like that connection with him and how he responds to her when she is upset because
Right.
things have not gone according to how she thinks they should have gone, and she's like a budding perfectionist, and he
Yeah.
nips it in the
It
bud.
it is it is one of those books that almost feels you remember how, like, indie films started coming out, like Juno, and it was like, I remember seeing Juno for the first time and being surprised when, like, she didn't get hit by a car. Because, like, well, yeah, that's what happens in a movie is, these terrible things happen to this person, but there was other things that happened that
Yeah,
were, and so Short had that feeling for me of, I was waiting for one of the adults to take advantage of her,
yeah,
and
okay,
it never happened
yeah,
because you don't need that in a
yeah,
children's book, right? But it feels like some of those things keep coming up in middle grade now. I've picked up some middle grade that I'm just like, wow, this is so not middle grade.
oh,
Um,
okay, yeah,
and so I appreciated that. But yeah, like what you're talking about. So they put on the play, and then a journalist gives them basically a good review, except for one small part of it. And so I liked that it didn't end there. It wasn't opening night and then, yes, this is the high point. It's opening night and we're done, right? They go all the way through. She goes all the way through the story to the end of it, which is the hard part of it because, again, it's letting go. She's already grieving her dog. She's finally getting over that a little bit. And then now she's to let go of another part of her.
yeah,
Okay, now the play is over and there's that letdown. And I remember that from doing plays all the time. You
yeah,
get you get this letdown afterwards of just, oh, now it's over, right?
mm.
Because it feels magical when you're doing it, and then it's done. So
It's so interesting. I've done a few plays before, and I've never had that feeling. That's probably why.
really? Okay, so when you've done plays, have you been on the stage or have you done backstage work?
I've actually only ever done on stage.
On stage.
I was never a backstage person.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I might have found that more interesting. I don't know. I wasn't That's one of the reasons I was never drawn to acting was because I never had an acting experience that really was magical for me, and I just assume that that's because that's not really for me,
Mm,
because I do know people who love it.
yeah.
Like what you're saying, how magical it was,
It
and
is.
there was one we did a play called Charlotte it was a version of Charlotte's Web in my high school, and it was kind of a it was a fun but really disastrous production at the same time,
Oh,
and
no.
yeah, like, parts of the set would collapse during the show, and then there was one performance where we started accidentally doing a scene from the following act, and it was so confusing. That I don't and we had people, like, leaving the production, and so we'd have to like, I had to take on a part at the last minute.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
on stage quite a bit for that one because normally, like, the first show I was ever a part of was actually Bye Bye Birdie, and I just was a reporter. So
Okay.
I literally just popped out of a trap door and asked a few questions, and that was my part in the play, and I
Hey,
was
but you had a speaking role. That's
it was a speaking role, but then
yeah.
then for the rest of it, I was like a parent, and I was kind of an extra, and then but Charlotte's Web, which was, like, kind of an adventure, was I was on stage a lot, and yeah, it was fun, and it was a really interesting group experience, but it wasn't kind of like the magical thing, because
Really?
yeah, and I think it's just I love watching plays. I love watching people perform. For me, the magic is being in the audience.
Okay.
The magic is watching
Yeah.
or being the writer.
Right, right, there you go.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah, I mean, maybe I would feel differently if it was a different kind of production. I mean, I didn't really love Bye Bye Birdie. I didn't love the story. Maybe if it had been Shakespeare, because I was kind of a serious kid and I liked Shakespeare. So maybe if it was Shakespeare, I would have.
Right.
Yeah, you never know. So I don't want to put the kibosh on my potential theater career, but it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've done a little bit of both. I've been on stage, and then I've been behind the scenes, and I've done both at the same time. I
Okay.
was actually, when I did Wizard of Oz, I was Glinda, and I was also the assistant. Basically, I was the assistant to the assistant director.
Okay. Wow.
um, so because there's the director, the assistant director, and then I was her assistant. So it was my job to attend rehearsals and basically take notes on where people were being blocked, and so this is where they should be, right? They should be standing. We've decided that they need to be standing stage left here, and so when they're not, then I can remind them. That kind of and then I was kind of an understudy at the same time, because Glinda was only on stage a couple times, and so I had an understudy, and then I was understudy for Dorothy. So I knew the entire play backwards and forwards, and got to act with some incredible guys who were playing the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Lion, and it was I love theater.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
I can tell. Yeah.
The reading short, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to go back and be in theater. So I actually went. So I went to Whitworth, right? So Corin and I both graduated from Whitworth with creative writing degrees. When I first started at Whitworth, I had a theater scholarship. I was going to minor in theater.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and basically I got there, was signed up to do theater, was signed up to do journalism. I was going to be on the newspaper and take 16 credits, and and I was going to do all these things, and discovered, oh, I'm a freshman, I can't do everything. Because I also want to make friends and have a social life, and so it was like, okay. So something had to give. So like the newspaper was the first to give, and theater, and I realized I wanted to focus on my writing and on history. So then I ended up getting a minor in history instead. And it was, but giving up theater was really hard for me. And what it came down to was I hate the audition part of it. I don't like auditioning. I get very, very nervous. And so the only reason I had gotten these lead roles in Buena Vista, so I grew up in Buena Vista, Colorado, which is like an hour south of here, southwest. And it's a small town of maybe 2,000 in the summer when everybody's there. Like, my graduating class in high school was 65 people at a public school. So, very small. And so being part of community theater was amazing because there weren't that many people. Mm-hmm. And so it was the same group every time. So it was a very familial feeling.
Yeah.
And our director she was crazy and incredible. Okay. I was telling you about, like, when we did Wizard of Oz, just how it was different. It was closer to the book than I realized, because things like, I thought it was so brilliant of her to make the wizard a ventriloquist, because we had a guy, he was actually a pastor in town who also part-time as a ventriloquist. He had the dummy and everything. Well, then reading the book, Oz describes himself as that. He says, I'm a ventriloquist. I can throw my voice. I was like, oh, that's where she got that from.
Yeah.
Not a brilliant idea. She took it right out of the book. But there were other things that she changed a lot of. Like, I was Glinda, but I had my Glynettes, who were my backup doo-wop singers, behind me, because that gave more roles for all the little girls who wanted to be a part of it. Yeah. Very big on making roles so everybody who auditioned could be a part of it. Yeah. Nice. Which is brilliant. It's wonderful. And so she changed it a lot. She made it really fun. Anyway, it was just, working with her was amazing. So so I've done both sides of it. I am ready to direct. I'm ready to be the one who's like making the decisions and organizing it and putting it all together. But I miss acting. I actually, after Andrew and I had gotten married, we lived a couple different places. We ended up back in BV, and I did a local theater production of The Trial of God by Ellie Wiesel, who wrote Night. Yeah. Have you ever read Trial of God?
I haven't. I've read Night, but not Trial of God.
Oh, it's hard. It's a good one. It's about the pogroms. Mm-hmm. And it's and I played a part that got to give this incredible, basically a monologue with a few people interjecting here and there. And basically I had to cry, or I got to cry on stage, because it made me cry every time I said it. Uh-huh. It's about this terrible thing that happens to this woman and her story. and it would make me cry. And I asked, and talking to the director, and he was like, you know what, that's okay. As long as you can get the words out and I can understand you, it's okay
Yeah.
if you're crying, because it fits. Of course
Yeah.
you're crying.
Yeah.
That was the last time I acted. It was really hard role. But
Yeah.
I loved it.
Was that when you were in high school?
So no, this would have been after I was married. This was
Oh,
as
yeah,
an
that's
adult. Yeah, yeah.
right.
So this was an adult production, community theater. So it's like maybe 6, 8 parts, the
Yeah. Mhm.
smaller play. It was so good to be back on stage though, and to be I was actually working with a couple adults that had been like the adults when I was in high school doing theater, and so it was so good to work with them as an adult now. And um,
Yeah.
and the thing is, there's so many parts of theater, right? And that's something else that I liked about In Short. She was talking about, there's the costumer and there's the makeup artist who then helps
Yeah.
on opening night. And there's the ticket takers and there's the ushers and there's the light guy and the sound guy and the special effects wire guy who's doing the monkeys and all of that. And there's other ways to be involved in theater. You don't have to be
Yeah.
on stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the chance to tell a story and to do it live. Like,
Yeah.
I have no interest in ever doing film stuff.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of acting. That's,
Yeah.
it's very different. Yeah. Whereas on stage, just that live performance, the energy in a theater. Every time I go see a theater production, I leave it going, man, I miss doing that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember when I was, a kid, my grandmother taking me to Twelfth Night in San Diego,
Oh yeah.
and, see, I did fall in love with theater, but I fell in love with it as an audience member, and
Mm,
I just loved seeing a story acted out, and honestly, when I think about my own stories being acted out, it's always in a play. I rarely imagine them as films,
yeah.
because my first kind of idea of something being acted out as a story was theatrical. Um,
Hmm.
even though obviously I grew up on movies but I think because I grew up on film, seeing something on stage was so startlingly real. And,
Hmm.
like, you could look at the costumes and see the actual fabric and the light as the people were turning, and you could see I don't know, and it not only did it not bother me that there was obviously an ending to this world where you could see into the backstage and you could tell that things were props. I loved the fact that I had to use my imagination
Yes.
to sew it all together. That far from being like a limitation, that was an intrigue for me.
Yes.
The limited space of theater, and I think about that when I'm actually writing. I think a little bit theatrically, where I'm like, what can I stage in one room?
Right.
How can you limit the action to get the most out of the space that you have? Because that's kind of a theatrical convention that's really interesting when you see how things are blocked. And,
Right.
like, I remember going to an opera and there was a murder scene or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And there's a confrontation between two people in this murder scene, and how they staged it and how they showed this person fleeing from this murderer in this like small space on the stage, keeping it interesting even though the scene is going on and on. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, they put so much thought into it, and like, if you don't appreciate it, it can just seem like entertainment, but you're like, someone planned this really beautifully.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, I don't know. That's a
No,
long thing
no,
to
I
say.
think I think Julia kind of talks about that in Short. She talks about when opening night happens and everything goes wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's opening night. That's what happens, you know. And I thought it was so funny that they had a reviewer come to opening night, because that's one of the things, like, you should never have a reviewer come to opening night. That is usually when they come, unfortunately. And then
Yeah,
you're like, okay, can you come to like the second night? Because usually the second night is best because
yeah,
then we've got all the jitters out. We've done it once.
yeah,
Let's do it again, right? But I love that, but
yeah,
yeah, she talks about that, about how, she appreciates the art. She appreciates what they're doing, and not
yeah,
everybody that she's on stage with feels the same way as her, right?
yeah,
A lot of the munchkins, because she's one of the munchkins, they
yeah,
they don't realize what they're doing
yeah.
is art, he has the whole thing with the director and talking to him about that, and it's like, but you're bringing your own self to the art, and that's what's so
Yeah,
beautiful about theater, is each person brings something different,
yeah,
and then it's different every time you see it, right? So, like, I've seen producers. That's the one I think I've seen actually more than Wicked. Is I've seen producers. No, I think Wicked is still the one I've seen more often. think I've seen Wicked 7 times.
Oh, wow.
Producers 4 or 5 times. So I actually saw Wicked. I saw it on the West End in London. And then I've also seen it. I saw it on Broadway, but it wasn't with Idina Menzel. I was right after that. It was Shoshana Bean was Elphaba. And then I saw it in Seattle, and I saw it here in Denver. I'm trying to remember the last place. Anyway, every time you see it, it's going to be somebody else playing a role. So it's not like a movie where every time I turn on Ocean's 11, Danny Ocean is being played by
Isn't it George Clooney? Isn't it George Clooney?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Maybe. Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh, my brain's going. Brad Pitt is his sidekick. So anyway, every time you turn on a movie, it's going to be the same person playing it the same way because they have chosen that version of it to edit into the film, right?
Yeah.
Let's do something that I actually know. Lord of the Rings. That I can name people off of. Every time I see it, Elijah Wood is going to play Frodo, and he's going to do the stupid scream when he gets skewered with the sword that I hate, right? But they chose to go that way with the film. Every time I see Wicked, it's different because it's a different actress bringing something new to how she inflects on certain parts. Or maybe they have decided, this director has decided to go a different direction with Oz, with how they're going to portray him as a person. And, it's not necessarily even costuming choices. It's the person bringing something different to the acting. Right. But then even seeing a play the same, over and over again with the same people, every night is different.
Yeah.
You're going to bring something different, or something will go wrong. I mean, something always goes wrong. And that's part of why I love live theater too, is because every time you see a production, something goes wrong. And it brings that element of, I am the only person here, or, me and the other 100 people that are here with me are the only people who are going to experience it this way. And be able to have this story, because we have this shared experience of seeing the time when Richard Kind forgot his lines playing Bialystok as in The Producers, right? But I was there that night when he forgot his lines, and it was hilarious. So, and it was his, 200th time doing it, but but you still forget things and things like that. And but it brings that element of just, I don't know, it's just, there's something beautiful about that. Something.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear actors interviewed and how they talk about, especially British actors who more often have theatrical and film careers simultaneously, how they talk about the difference between doing them and which one they prefer. And they always mention that with theater, it's different every night, and you can change things, you can hone things. And if it's film, not only do you not have the chance to do the performance again, but you don't really even have control over what take they use. So it's
right. Yeah. So you might think, oh, I think this version was really good. The director decides to go a different way. Like, whereas when you're acting live, in the end, it's the actor's choice.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. If they decide to do it that way, they're going to do it that way. The director has no say in it.
Yeah. And, I mean, also, because I remember being on a film set once with a friend of mine was doing a film for film school, and in a way, like I didn't know really what to expect, and it was magical. I mean, they talk a lot about the magic of filmmaking, but you really probably have to be on the set knowing what's going on, because otherwise it's a lot of wires and lights, and then the setup for every take takes so long that it's like, for me, I'm like, this is probably why I think I would be sparked into creative life by seeing something on stage, or by at least seeing a play being put together where you have long periods of people acting and blocking out the scenes together, because filmmaking is really slow. And sometimes you're just taking like one shot of someone like making a sandwich, or
eating a sandwich,
or something. And you do get the periods of acting where you actually get to see a scene acted out, but even then they stop everything and get a different angle on it, and so everything moves. So it's just, it's so technically complex making a film, whereas theater, I just feel like you just get to completely get sucked into the what's being, I mean, obviously when you're watching a movie you get that, but even the kind of behind the scenes of theater is more, I don't know, you kind of get the sense of the drama being assembled, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah.
So,
and I know you love Shakespeare, and I know you've been watching a lot of Macbeth. right? So you've seen a lot of the different, right, interpretations of Macbeth.
You know, honestly, I've watched one
Oh, okay.
version. I've only watched one. I tried watching the newer one that just came out that the Coen brothers did, The
Yeah.
Tragedy of Macbeth with Denzel Washington and what's her face? Brilliant actress that I love, but I can't remember her name. But she yeah.
Yeah.
Um and I actually think it's great. I just wasn't really in the mood to finish it. It's very different. So, I will say this of Macbeth after watching a film version. Actually, the version that I've seen is the one with Michael Fassbender.
Oh, yeah.
Um, that just came out. Like it's actually not that old either. That one's really good, I think.
Yeah.
And Macbeth is so like, after reading the text, I'm like, "It would be hard for me to humanize Macbeth and Lady Macbeth if I don't see them acted." And with Shakespeare, you need to see him acted, and with Macbeth, you need even more to see them acted because they especially Lady Macbeth she's just hard to see as anything other than a tyrant.
Yeah.
But then when she's acted, especially by a really talented actress, I have empathy for her as much as I can have
Yeah.
by the scene where she's truly repentant. So
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I kinda took over it. I'm not sure what if
No.
you were yeah, but Shakespeare I love, and he also like, Shakespeare highlights the beauty of acting because those words need to come alive by someone speaking them,
Yes.
and it's so different reading him, and it's I do still love to read him, but there's a reason why after I read one of his plays, I wanna see the film version. Or
Yes.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. He's meant to be seen.
yeah,
It's, and heard because somebody brings something different to it every way. So that just reminded me of a so in short, one of the quotes that she says is art is about helping people to see life in a different way.
yeah,
I think actually the director says that, but then she repeats it a couple times. And I love that. I thought that's absolutely true of any kind of art.
yeah,
Art is helping people see life in a different way,
yeah,
right? And not even necessarily through your own eyes, right? I can write a book and
yeah,
I'm coming to it from a certain place of experience and
yeah,
bringing something to it. And I see my books in a certain way that other people are going to bring their own experiences to and
yeah,
have a different experience
yeah,
when you read the book, right? Or
absolutely.
like short, reading it as a child and then reading it as an adult.
Yeah,
You're still, but it's still helping you see life in a different way.
yes, and actually now that so I have seen multiple versions of Macbeth.
Oh,
It's just I saw them when I was a teenager,
yes.
'cause we studied it several times. When I was in high school, we studied it several times. We actually went and saw a live production. We saw a film from the '70s,
Yeah.
and this is actually to your point. Macbeth did not make a dent in me at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was too dark, it was too grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the plays that I mean, I had 2 teachers in high school who were fascinated by it, and I was like, "That's just my luck," because, of course, it would be this dark, violent play, which is hard for me to read.
Mm-hmm.
Then, for whatever reason, when I got older and because of, some stuff that kinda happened in my own life, not murder, but, just some darker things where I realized what human conflict can mean and
Right.
the effect that it can have on people when you have someone who does not think about their own ambition.
Mhm,
Um, the play totally gained a resonance for me, and
mhm,
that's when I went back and watched the film version with Michael Fassbender and then started this other film version that I didn't finish, but I was like, that's what made it kind of come alive for me, and I'm like, "It is interesting because the seeds of my love for this play were planted when I was a kid and didn't even like it."
mhm,
And then it's come alive to me through the different versions that I've seen,
mhm,
because even watching the version with Michael Fassbender showed me, like, I didn't necessarily have the same love or appreciation for the previous performances because I think this one I like better.
mhm,
The actors feel more, like, emotionally resonant to me,
mhm.
and I think that's just because nowadays we have more of that desire to connect and humanize people, which I think Macbeth really needs.
Okay.
Um, and the versions that I saw before were a little bit more theatrical, like, stately,
Yes.
um, and it was harder to kind of see the humanity in them, even though they were brilliant actors. But this one, especially with how they film nowadays, showing people's faces so up close, not making them perfect, it like there was this deep emotional resonance that I think if you're gonna connect to characters like Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, you really have to try. You know, like you really
Right.
have to make them accessible as people. And that
Mm.
was what that film version sparked in me was like, oh, they can be accessible. They can
Mhm.
be people that you can get into their psyche and not just it's not just a horror story. There actually is wisdom and beauty here, even if it's twisted.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
Which is why I love adaptations like Wicked that go
yeah,
into the Wicked Witch of the West. All right, let's twist this on its head. Is
yeah,
she, is she really wicked? Right. That's
yeah,
the whole question.
yeah,
In fact, that's I think what the opening line is are people born wicked or are they turned that way by what
yeah,
happens to them? Right.
yeah.
Um, it's a deep question and it's really interesting to see it done with. I think that's why we're seeing so many retellings of fairy tales with what is the Sleeping Beauty, Maleficent. What is Maleficent's story? Why should we actually feel
Mhm.
for her, right? Because there are layers to people, and
Yeah.
there's more there than meets the eye. And so yeah. So have you seen any? Speaking of like different renditions of Macbeth and stuff like that, have you? What other things? So Short is a twist off of Wizard of Oz. Do you have any others that jump to mind? Like other? You said you haven't seen Wicked. So are there other versions that you've seen? Like have you seen Tin Man?
Wait, that's a thing?
Yes. So no. So Tin Man is it's a 3-part miniseries with Zoe Deschanel and McDonough, that guy. And is it Neil McDonough? I wrote it down at some point. And yeah, it's a 3-part miniseries. I think it's on Prime now. Oh, Alan Cumming, he's in it too. Alan Cumming is Scarecrow. Neil McDonough is the Tin Man. Zoe Deschanel is Dorothy. But I would say more like steampunk
Okay.
retelling, and it's a twist on it. It's an adult
Yeah.
retelling, re-examining the whole story, but it's not a film version of the story. But that's what I love about it is it's like seeing a twist on Cinderella, seeing Ever After, right, which is the story of Cinderella, but it's told in a very different way, and it's wonderful because you're so familiar with the normal themes, and so it just brings another layer to it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the Tin Man is wonderful. And then of course there's like Muppets Oz and The Wiz. Have you ever seen The Wiz?
I'm not. No.
The Wiz is wonderful. It's all African American cast, and it's Michael Jackson is in it. He plays I think he's the Scarecrow, or is he the Tin Man? Um, it's really really kooky. Like if you think Wizard of Oz is nothing like Alice in Wonderland, wait until you see the Wiz. Because then you're like, oh no, there's lots of things that are very similar to Alice, where it's just a little bit bizarre. But it's got incredible music, really good music, really good dancing. The costuming is a little out of this world, but it's a really good retelling.
Okay.
Yeah, a different version of it. I think those were the only ones I had listed. Yeah. So do you have any that you have seen?
Of specifically The Wizard of Oz or
Yeah, yeah, retellings, remaskings, like Short. Like I had never read Short, so thank
yeah.
you for
Um,
introducing me to that one. Yeah.
I'm sure I have, but nothing's coming to mind right now of just like another version of a beloved story.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of like, you know, things that have been like Winnie the Pooh and like how
Yeah,
we extrapolate kind of personalities from Winnie the Pooh, and there's like different philosophies like the Tao of Pooh and stuff like that.
yes,
I
yes,
so I can think of those, and I can think of like something that we're planning on discussing in the future, which is actually extrapolating kind of the seven heavens of antiquity from the Chronicles of Narnia. So that's kind of what comes to mind, but not actually like taking a story and kind of modernizing it or putting it in the context of making a play about it.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
So the only like film version of Wizard of Oz you've ever seen is the movie, is the
I saw when I was a kid, I saw this thing called Return to Oz,
okay,
and it was a lot weirder.
okay.
And so I think that's where I kind of got the sense that Oz is weird. I remember there was a witch there that would put on a different head.
Yep,
Like she had a hall of heads, and she would put on a different one, and it was
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, this is really interesting.
Okay, so that actually is the Return to Oz. That is the book. Yeah. That's
Oh, it is? Okay.
yeah.
Which that might not be as weird to read as it is to see. I don't know.
It's definitely one of those. So, like, I don't think I've mentioned this since we went live. I mentioned this to you beforehand, but this is the version of Wizard of Oz, the Wizard of Oz books that my kids read over and over again. They are they're drawn by Eric Shanauer and Scotty Young, and they're produced by Marvel. And they are graphic novel retellings of the books. They are one of the things I wanted to do was as soon as I finished the book of Wizard of Oz, I went and grabbed this because I wanted to see because it's called abridged, but I wasn't sure how abridged it was. And I looked through it. It's got every line and every single thing that happens in the books is in this.
Okay.
The only reason it's abridged is because all of the descriptions are told visually instead of
yeah.
by word, right? But it's exactly the book.
Yeah.
So like the Wicked Witch of the West is not green, she just has one eye and she's really creepy. And so there's like it's pretty dark. That's the Wicked Witch of the West. But these are the versions that my kids love, and I love that they read them over and over again because, especially now that I know they are literally the classic fiction books.
Yeah,
it's a great way to get your kids into reading classic fiction. And so we found some others like this. There's like my son has Robin Hood and Arthur. Like we're familiar with the stories, and then we can talk about the stories and stuff. And I love that so there's other versions that are like this. So they're pictorial. We've got another one that's drawn. This one is another one that's it's all pictures. But it's such it's a great way to get the kids into it. And then we can talk about those. But because it is word for word the books, I was talking to them about the mice that save the lion and the little mouse queen, and there she is.
I love those little parts of the book.
I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
There is so much more to the book, and that's something that I don't know that we really touched on, but that the book, be prepared for the Wicked Witch of the West is a minor role, and there's still half of a book afterwards.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to it and you're like, oh, this is almost done. No, it's not.
Yeah.
You're only halfway through.
I was really surprised by that. Even though I'd obviously read the book before, going back into it, I was like, oh, I forgot that they continue to have an adventure and a journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And even after they get their stuff.
Yeah.
They go back to Oz, they get their, now I've got brains, courage, and a heart. And then they go on this whole trip because of course, Oz takes off in his balloon, and now they have to get to Glinda, who is the only one who can help them. And of course, get there and Deus Ex Machina, or Deus Ex Shuna. Anyway, it's all down to the shoes. But because it is, ultimately the story is about you have what you need with you.
Yeah.
Right? And like you were saying, like there's the biblical side of it of, God will never put you in a situation without giving you the tools you need to handle it. Right. So from the very beginning, she's got those shoes. And we all know that that's how she's going to get out. And so Glinda says that, from the moment you got here, you could have left.
Yeah.
Right.
It was just knowing.
Yeah.
Having to learn what you already have.
Right. And go through that experience. Right.
Yeah.
There is that whole journey. There's a point to journeys. Sometimes we have to go through the journey.
Yeah.
To learn about something we have already. And like you said, that whole being away from home in order to appreciate what home is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And I love the fact that you brought up the Deus Ex Machina. The God out of the machine.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a very theatrical term.
Yes.
Theatrical literary. That's from ancient Greece. That's from ancient Greece. So, yeah.
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 Shakespeare uses it a lot.
A supernatural resolution.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
And the sense that it's always there. Like they could have done it from the very beginning. So why do we need this whole story, right? But
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Deus Ex Machina can also just mean just a supernatural setting straight of things without
right,
necessarily even that. But
right,
um, yeah, but still with the shoes being the thing that take her out of her problem
right,
and
exactly.
back into into the world. I actually think Deus Ex Machinas are underrated. Like, there's kind of a thing against them in the writing world, but I just but that's because people are kind of like, well, there can't be a supernatural resolution to things, and it's like, but there can if the supernatural element, especially in like a fairy tale, is meant to illustrate something or show us something about our experience, or yeah. So anyway,
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, good books.
yep.
Everybody should go read them. So do you think you will continue your journey through Oz? Will you read any more of them here and there when
Maybe
you have a chance?
maybe sometime in the future. I
Yeah.
think not now because I have other books on my reading list, but
Mhm.
yeah, it'd be interesting to explore more of Oz.
Yeah, yeah. I'm very excited that like I read through these with the kids every once in a while. So I think I'm gonna keep flipping through those for just a light reading for a little while. Um, so for those of you who like to join us every month, next month we are not going to be doing a read along. We'll take a summer break, and then in August you can rejoin us for the third Thursday, and we will have a special guest along with us to discuss "Till We Have Faces" by C.S. Lewis, which I have listened to it as an audiobook and I have read it as an actual book. Both ways were great. I think I liked it better actually reading it myself. I'm trying
Hmm.
to remember who the narrator was.
Oh yeah, that can have a big impact.
But yeah, and I remember thinking it felt very long when I listened to it. But when I read it, it was like, oh no, this is fine.
Yeah.
But it's a C.S. Lewis
Hmm.
retelling of a the myth of Psyche and Cupid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So another retelling, um,
Yep.
and it's really good.
Yeah.
It's one of those. It like I immediately want to go read the actual myth, right? Read some different versions of the myth and see like what did he do differently and what did he bring to it. And it's C.S. Lewis bringing a lot of biblical truth to something that is Greek.
Yeah.
So but just some really profound themes. And so I think that's why I thought it was long as an audiobook, because it's C.S. Lewis. So when you get into his non-Narnia stuff, and even Narnia has some really deep stuff that you have to take a
Yes.
minute to think about. But Till We Have Faces is an adult read.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely an adult read. Don't read it with your kids. For one, they would be bored out of their mind. And for two, there's a lot of themes that
Yeah.
you take the time to really mull over,
Yeah.
because there's some really, really neat things that come out in that story.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm really excited to talk about that one.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. All right. Did you have anything else?
No, this has been great.
All
Yeah.
right. Yes. Yeah. We're talking about Wizard of Oz. Love it. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and watching it later. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to my channel at P. Meredith Author. You can follow me on social media under the same. If you have any questions, you want to email me. My email is in the the about section of my channel here. So feel free to ask any questions, and I'll get back to you when I can. Let's see. Right now, I've got 4 books out now. So I've got my Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries, in which, like I said, I do mention Wizard of Oz in there. And then Adita Dreadful Note is my newest release about Anna Catherine Green. It is set in 1872 New York, and it's about the mother of detective fiction and her writing of her first book. And so she is writing pre-Wizard of Oz, so there's no references in that one, though there are other things that, yeah, I probably took from Wizard of Oz. There's some themes there that I can see. But like all good fairy tales, they come out everywhere. So thank you so much for joining us. And to hear what Corin is up to, you got to just follow me here for now.
Yeah.
But he is working on books, and we're going to get one published here soon. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.